What's up, amigos? Diablo 4 is right around the corner, so I think it's time to start pumping out some build guides in preparations for release. Today we have my Shadow Dancer Rogue build, so let's go ahead and jump into the build. This build revolves around 3 skills. First, we have our Puncture. This is our basic skill, which allows us to inflict vulnerable status effects reliably every 3rd hit. Our core skill is Twisting Blades. This is what we'll be spamming constantly. It's important to try and drag Twisted Blades through as many targets as possible when open world farming to maximize our cooldown reduction enhancement with advanced Twisting Blades. When our Twisting Blades return, your active cooldowns are reduced by 0.25 seconds per enemy they pass through, up to 3 seconds. Shadow Imbuement is our imbuement of choice. This is what will be popping every time it's off cooldown. This will allow us to imbue our weapons. Our next 2 strikes deal additional shadow damage and infect enemies for 6 seconds. The infected enemies explode on death, dealing 56% damage to all surrounding enemies. This also applies to single target targets. If the infection expires before the single enemy dies, it will deal 56% damage to only that enemy, so it can be used on bosses as well. For our main defensive layer, we're going to be using Dark Shroud. Now, not only is this giving us a flat damage reduction, we're also getting stacking movement speed. For our ultimate, we choose to use Shadow Clone, Prime Shadow Clone, and then Supreme Shadow Clone, which allows us to do 20% additional damage. Shadow Clone comes up and it mimics our actions for 15 seconds. Shadow Clone is also one of the abilities that will scale pretty well when we get into endgame, when we start pairing it up with aspects and uniques. So before we talk about our passive nodes in the build, let's go ahead and take a look at the pros and cons of the build. So for the pros, it's just insane AoE clear. Between the Shadow Imbue and Twisted Boomerang effect and the Shadow Mimics, we have great mobility, we have inherent movement speed through passives, plus dash, plus our stacking from Dark Shroud. We have multiple defensive layers also from Dark Shroud. That gives us flat base reductions. We have passive and multiplicative damage reduction, and we have an insane dodge chance through our Keystone passive swap, and even through some aspects maybe. We also have great single target capabilities. We have phenomenal scaling, damage stacking. We have a lot of flexibility in the build as well. Maybe you don't like the dash ability. We can also swap that out for Shadow Step to make us more mobile, and it gives us a nice additional damage boost to certain targets. This build is very min-maxy for endgame as well. Me personally, I see that as a pro. Especially for those who want to go into endgame and don't want to really hit a brick wall, this build will scale. It's not reliant on aspects or uniques, and that's another great thing because we don't really like builds that revolve around one item. We want to be able to play it from the beginning to the end. And we have a lot of passive or Keystone passive freedom. We have 2 different choices that are really primarily for the build between Momentum and Victimize. Victimize is something we'll be using for clearing, and Momentum is really for bossing, especially great for world bosses to give us increased damage reduction, energy regen, and movement speed. Now the cons of the build, we really only have one reliable source of vulnerability, and that's through our Puncture. So because of this, we really like to stack our attack speed so we can just keep spamming Puncture, Twisting Blades. The build also really does not have real crowd control. The dash days is really it. And the builds, for some people, it's not for everyone. It's a very 1-2 play style. We spam Puncture, we pop Twisting Blades. Occasionally we pop our Dark Shroud, we keep that up. We also really want to use Shadow Imbuement off the, off cooldown, but for the most part, it's just 1-2. The first 20 levels can feel really slow. It felt really slow in the beta test. Once you hit around 22, 23 and onwards, it's going to speed up a lot, especially when you get those first couple legendary items while you're leveling. And of course, one of the cons, which is also a pro, min-maxing just isn't for everyone. Scaling can be difficult for some players. I try my best in my written guide to make it as easy for everyone to understand. I'll have a written guide in the description down below. Now the last and final con is it's a melee build, and everybody, that was one of their biggest complaints, is that melee felt clunky. To me, melee doesn't feel clunky. I think playing as many action RPGs as I have, Diablo 4 melee feels kind of clean to me. Some abilities, yes, some classes have these weird abilities that just the animations feel clunky, but for the most part, the gameplay for Rogue, especially being as mobile as we are, not as clunky. So let's take a quick look at our passive. Sturdy passive, we're taking this for 4% damage, close damage reduction. So since we are melee, we're always close. We take Siphoning Strikes, which gives us 1% life leech every time we crit an enemy who are also close, again, melee. We take 3 points into Weapon Mastery. Now it's important to note this, alright? So Weapon Mastery states you only get these bonuses when attacking based on weapon type. So here we have the opportunity to use both daggers and swords, and we have both these bonuses activated. We'll have a 15% increased damage to healthy enemies, which healthy status is enemies above 80% HP. And then we'll also have the 9% increased global damage when we wield a sword and attack with a sword. We take 1 point in the agile, which using a cooldown increases our dodge chance by 4% for 3 seconds. We're constantly using Shadow Imbuement. This is our main cooldown that we will be spamming. Once we hit 20, we go to Inner Sight, and we'll be able to spam a lot more, which means our cooldowns will come down a lot more because of our Twisting Blades. We take 1 point in Exploit, which is 6% increased damage to healthy and injured enemies. So as I said, a couple seconds ago, healthy above 80% HP, injured are enemies at 35% or less HP. So this is a quote execute phase. So in our imbuement section, we have 1 point in the Shadow Crash. Shadow Crash is just a lucky hit chance to stun. Twisted Blades has a 33% lucky hit chance. So the thing with this is, if we, for whatever reason, there's going to be opportunity, or not opportunities, there's going to be situations where you just can't not have certain stats. One of those, it's damage to crowd controlled enemies. So this is something that could just work out for us unintended. The main reason we got this is for consuming shadows though. Each time we kill an enemy with shadow damage, which is a lot when we're open world farming because of the explosions, it chains, it's one big chain domino effect. We will generate 10 energy every time we kill an enemy with shadow damage. We take 3 points in the precision imbuement. Imbued skills gain 9% crit strike chance. We use its Shadow Imbue on cooldown. It buffs 2 Twisted Blades hits. That just gives us Twisted Blade more crit chance. We take 1 point in Aftermath, which using an ultimate skill restores 25 energy. Basically, since Shadow Clone, we only get it for 15 seconds. We want to make sure that we get that energy back to spam as much as possible in that 15-second window to maximize our Shadow Clone DPS. 1 point Adrenaline Rush. We're always moving. We're constantly moving. Whether it's dodging, evading, or dashing, or just running, this will be up pretty much all the time. This gives us 5% increased energy regen while moving. We also take a point in the haste. While we're above 50% max energy, we gain 5% increased movement speed. While below 50% max energy, we gain 5% increased attack speed. This will be really nice when we're open world farming, when we're spamming Twisting Blades, applying puncture. We tend to have a great uptime on attack speed when we're just doing the 1-2. As I said earlier, our Keystone passive, for the most time, I choose to go Victimize, mainly because exposure is really just trap skills, precision is, specifically for marksman, and close quarters is a hybrid build. So you're going to be back and forth between Victimize for open world farming, momentum really targeted towards harder bosses and world bosses. Now, the difference between the Renown 1 and Renown 10 builds are just passive stacking. So, for example, we are going to put 3 points in the Sturdy, 3 points in the Siphon Strikes. We are going to go down to 3 in Exploit and 3 in Malice. And that's literally the Renown 1 to 10 difference. Is just maxing out these 4 passive skills. So Sturdy will give us a maximum of 12% close damage reduction and 3% life leech. We'll have 18% increased damage to healthy and injured enemies, and we'll have an extra 9% increased damage to vulnerable enemies from the Malice passive. So again, everyone starts out on a basic Paragon board. So we're going to go ahead and move up on the right side here, taking these 3 dex nodes, and we're going to be moving to our first rare node, which gives us 10% damage and 4% life. Now, the way that these boards work is we'll also have bonus additions, and damage. In this case, we'll get another 10% damage, but we have to meet the requirement. In this case, it's 160 int. So we'll move on up, and we're going to be going towards the middle for our first glyph socket. Here we're going to choose to go for the closer glyph. For every 5 dex purchased within range, cutthroat skills deal 2% increased damage. The additional bonus is similar to the rares. Once we meet the requirement, we get that additional bonus. So in this case, it's 10% reduced damage. We need 40 dex in the glyph node itself. So here we're grabbing all these little dex nodes. We're grabbing up here in the top left of this Christmas tree. We are grabbing the intelligence, the damage nodes, and moving up to our next rare, which gives us another 10% flat global damage and 10 dex. This requires 170 int to get another 10% damage off the bonus. After we grab all these, we're going straight up to the northern point here. This is where we get to choose our class specific Paragon board. Now, if you aren't familiar with the Paragon boards, we are able to twist them. So for the first one here, we are going to be choosing the exploit weakness board. This actually starts out over on the eastern side here. I switched it and went left. On this board itself, we're taking 4 rare nodes. We're taking Artifice, which is just vulnerable damage. All 3 of these nodes plus the rare node, we're getting about 25% extra vulnerable damage plus another 10% if we meet the strength requirement of 180. We're taking the glyph node. In here, we're placing a combat node for every 5 intelligence purchased within range. Our core skills deal 4% increased crit strike damage, and an additional bonus if we meet 25 intelligence within the radius of the glyph. We get 12% energy restoration off of crit strikes. We're taking dosage, which gives us potion healing and extra dex, and we're taking these 2 7 int nodes next to dosage. Up on the northern part of the tree, we're taking exploit, more vulnerable damage. We're also taking damage to low injured enemies. We're taking 2 more vulnerable damage nodes. Again, this gives us a bonus 10% vulnerable damage, but this time we need to meet 2 different stat requirements of 220 dex and 170 int. Over towards the middle of the board, we want to make our way to exploit weakness. This is the legendary. Whenever we deal damage to a vulnerable enemy, they take 1% increased damage for you or from you for 6 seconds, up stacking to 15%. The left side of this board, we want to make sure that we go up to Hunter Killer. This gives us damage to elites. The bonus to 15 dex for another 16%. We also get movement speed for X amount of time after killing an elite. This is where we want to meet up on our left side board attack gate. We are then going to go to Leyrana's Instinct. From here, we're going to dash right to the middle. We're going to grab this rare node Nimble, which gives us attack speed and damage. The bonus when we reach 230 dex will be more attack speed. We're going to grab all these damage nodes. This is a great board for damage. We really only need to hit the middle here. We get total of 7.5 attack speed from the magic nodes, an extra 10% damage from the magic nodes. And then up north, we're grabbing damage reduction from dots, because the bleeds and poisons in Diablo 4 really do hurt a lot. And we're taking the 100% dodge chance for 1.5 seconds when inner sight gauge becomes full. So the main reason why I only went to level 80 is because most people, when it comes to ARPGs, they stop at a certain point. Diablo 2, most people stop around their 90s. In Path of Exile, people usually stop around 92 to 95. I don't think it'll be any different. I want to play it safe. For the most part, I think everybody will hit 80 plus, 80 to 90 pretty easily, but we really don't know how the XP values work. We don't know if it's going to be a super long grind or if it's going to be, pretty easy to hit level 100. So I thought 80 was really a good cutoff point. And yeah, that's it. Again, I'll have the written guides in the description down below. If you enjoyed this guide, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. I'll be pumping out more builds all the way up until release. So until next time, amigos, take care.